Hi, everyone. I see folks are logging on and signing in. We'll give it just a couple of minutes for folks to get online, and then we'll start the session. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks to those of you who are joining. We're going to give it just one more minute, and then we'll kick off the webinar. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get us started all. Welcome to the Digital Square and USAID webinar, where we're going to talk about the Map and Match project for COVID-19. Thank you all so much for joining today. I welcome you to use the chat to introduce yourselves. Please be sure to direct all of your comments and questions in the chat for all panelists and attendees. I think the default setting on Zoom is to go straight to the panelists. But we want you to all be able to speak with each other. And I wanted to note that we will probably not have time for a Q&A today, so we really want to use that chat feature for any of your comments, for any of your questions. Don't be shy as we're presenting to go ahead and put questions in the chat. We have the Digital Square team who's worked on this Map and Match project for the past several months, all on the session today, so everyone will be able to answer questions. So with that, I'll get started. My name is Amanda Bendor. I am the Deputy Director of Partnerships at Digital Square at PATH. And I've also been the technical lead for this Map and Match project, which has been really amazing, and really excited to share all that we have done and all that we have learned with you all today. So I'll be joined today in the presentation by Merrick Schaefer, who's the Senior Digital Health Advisor at USAID Global Health Bureau, and also my colleague Varunda Rathod, who is a Program Officer at Digital Square. Can we go to the next slide, please? A little bit about what we're going to cover today. So we're going to give you an overview of Digital Square. For those of you who don't know about Digital Square, we'll briefly tell you about who we are. We'll give you a background of this Map and Match activity. Talk about why we've done this. Why is this important? We'll share with you our findings from our various assessments. And we'll talk about we'll go through an overview of all of the outputs. There have been a lot of products that we have produced through this project. So we'll walk through those, and also spend a fair amount of time walking through the country briefs and how you can use one of these country briefs to inform some of your decisions and some of your planning for COVID and even beyond COVID response. We'll talk about a couple of common questions that come up in terms of using digital tools for COVID response, questions that come up from country leaders, from implementing partners, and from donors. And then we'll share a few final thoughts on what we've learned through this project. Next slide. So for those of you who've not heard about Digital Square, we are a digital health marketplace, or a square, where supply and demand come together to accelerate health equity. Our team works with donors, implementing partners, country leaders, and policymakers to advance digital transformation. A lot of our focus on Digital Square is supporting global goods. So enabling shelf readiness, supporting interoperability, all of this so countries have access to flexible, robust solutions to meet their needs. One of the unique things about Digital Square is we're a multi-donor initiative, and we currently have 15 investors who have invested into the initiative. We invite you to learn more about Digital Square on our website. Perhaps someone from our team can just drop the link in the chat. We'll go to the next slide. I'm going to pass it over to Merrick to talk a little bit about some of the goals for the Map and Match project.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Merrick Schaefer, as Amanda said, I'm here today to talk a little bit about what the Map and Match project is and why we did it. So for those of you who are not familiar, Map and Match is a large-scale global landscaping that we did looking for digital health tools deployed at scale in every country on the planet. And we'll go through the bit about what we found in a second, but we were specifically looking within the larger set of tools we found for tools that were already deployed for COVID-19 response and vaccine distribution, as well as tools that can be adapted for COVID-19 response and vaccine distribution. So we were trying to understand what the global landscape was for how digital tools are being used around the world. Next slide, please. And why we started with this, this is something we started a little bit of time ago, was because I was the data lead at USAID in the Global Development Lab for the Ebola response. And we learned a lot of key lessons around the uses of digital technology during that time. One of them was around sort of the impact of deploying lots of new systems in the midst of a crisis and all of the things that go wrong with that, of the inability to get those systems stood up, the time it takes to actually deploy them, the inability to share data between them, and the inability to sustain them once the funding from the crisis ends. And so one of the key lessons that we learn, and there's a really great report that I could point people to, maybe someone could post it in the chat, that sort of summarizes over 200 people as impressions of how to use digital technologies and data to fight an epidemic. But one of the key lessons was that if you can reuse existing tools that are already deployed in country, it will speed up the deployment because the devices are in people's hands, people have been trained in them, it saves money. You have to purchase those things, pay for those trainings. It reduces the duplicative investments. You don't end up with many similar systems. It leads to sustainability. Most of the tools we invested in that were existing systems in country, in Liberia and Sierra Leone and Guinea, are still there and still working. Whereas many of the tools that were sort of dropped in the midst of the crisis ended when the funding that paid for those tools ended. And then this all in turn ends up strengthening government leadership in the context of a country. And then if the tools are already there and already able to exchange data, then you can exchange the data related to the pandemic. So all of these are reasons as to why you want to prioritize the use of tools that already exist and adapting those tools as opposed to investing in new ones. Next slide, please. So what do you mean by adapting? And so adapting a tool, oftentimes we feature a lot of global goods, but though we looked at all sorts of different tools. So those of you who don't know what a global good is, it's an open source platform that's designed to be adapted and reused. It's an open source platform that's been funded by multiple donors, deployed in multiple countries, deployed at a significant amount of scale, and has a strong community around it. So it's not just any old open source project, but it's the sort of large scale tools that countries often use at the national level that are open. And that other tools, proprietary tools, can also be rapidly adapted. And so we recommend that be a first thing to explore. But with open tools, you can, because that's that's what the open part means, is that you can customize them to see fit. So a good example of an adapted tool would be the Open LIMS platform, which is Malawi's national digital supply chain tool. It's used in 650 facilities for 300 commodities. When COVID started, the Open LMS project was able to launch a separate, simple interface called Open LMS COVID Edition, which Malawi was able to implement on top of their existing platform using all of the same hardware and trained people and workflow patterns to manage COVID-19 related commodities based on the WHO product list for that. So rather than people starting at scratch and spending the next year trying to deploy some sort of supply chain system for COVID, and that sounds crazy when you say it, but people are doing that sort of thing for all sorts of systems around the world. They were quickly able to add an existing a module to an existing system. Next slide. And so the overall Map and Match project is broken into two phases, and we're at the end of the second one with this webinar today. With the first phase, we collected data from over 140 countries. It was a desk review And so the objective there was to have a very, very broad perspective. And then we were able to prioritize a series of countries. We did that in concert with other USAID missions and offices, as well as quite a number of other donors and partners. We identified 22 countries where we did much deeper dives. So we validated the data, we expanded the research questions we were asking, we interviewed key informants in country, as well as ministries of health where they had the time to work with us, and packaged all of that together into detailed briefs. And through all of this, we were coordinating with many members of the community and the funding space. Next slide. And so I really do want to emphasize that this was, while probably started by USAID, it was something that was done in partnership with a very wide range of actors in the space, because we really see the value of this data as one of being enabling coordination between different actors. So all of the entities on this list, multilaterals and donors, really supported the thinking around this work and shaped and formed it, contributed to a lot of the frameworks and tools that were developed, as well as the data set itself. But the Gates Foundation, GIZ, the World Health Organization, the World Bank, DIAL, Gavi, Global Fund, UNICEF, CDC, the Digital Health Atlas itself, and quite a number of others. Next. And so one of the challenges with a project like this is, if you're looking at 140 countries' digital health systems, is you end up with a tremendous amount of data. And so how do you organize that data in a way that makes sense? So one of the things we did with that large collective of partners was define 15 use cases. And so a use case is sort of a cluster of functionality related to achieving some specific health outcomes. So something like case management or contact tracing, laboratory systems. And so we identified and chose these specific use cases, and then tagged every system we found to support them. So next, I think I pass it to Verna. So what do we actually find in the data? So Verna, take it away.
Thank you, Merrick. Hi everyone, I'm Rinda. I'm a program officer at Digital Square, and I worked on the research portion of Map and Match. So as Merrick mentioned, during phase one, we did a pretty extensive phase literature review. Next slide, please. Where we reached out to our networks, looked at listservs, contacted everyone we could possibly find, reaching out to over 270 folks that ended up sending us, half of which ended up sending us documents, databases, websites, reports, you name it. We looked at it. And over the course of about 4 months, from last July to last October, our team reviewed 750 documents nearly, trying to collect any information we could about digital health tools. So descriptions, who might have funded them, where they were used, what they did, anything we could find, and collected that information and started essentially creating our own database. Next slide, please. And through that landscaping research, we were able to find digital health tools in 135 countries, and collected information for over 2,900 tools, which 78% of which were actually not in the Digital Health Atlas. And for those of you who don't know what the Digital Health Atlas is, it is the largest repository of digital health tool deployments in the world. And so our exercise was able to collect a vast number of deployments that had not previously been identified in any other landscaping, including the Digital Health Atlas. Excuse me. Next slide. We took all of that landscaping information, so taking all of that desk review, and we used it to inform our second phase, essentially what we call the community-based data collection phase. Next slide, please. The first phase of that was figuring out where we wanted to do a deep dive. So as Merrick mentioned, we focused our phase 2 research in 22 focus countries. And so we took that phase 1 data, looked for countries that had enough tools that our analysis could be meaningful, but not so many tools that we couldn't really provide any sort of support or information based on our information. And we looked at a variety of other factors too, like where there were potential donor interests, where there were people were already moving and had interest in digital health strategies, because we wanted to make sure that we tried to identify folks that could actually use our country briefs that we were developing. And Amanda will spend a lot of time talking you through country briefs, but just a quick note, we've published about 9 of these briefs. Afghanistan, Angola, Cameroon, Kenya, Malawi, Mozambique, Niger, Rwanda, and Senegal are on our website. And the rest of these will be coming in the next few months, or sorry, the next few weeks, but this is our full list. Next slide, please. And as we did this deep dive, we wanted to make sure that we understood the depth of the tools that were available in a country. So essentially, what are all the tools that are there? How do we figure out what's being actively used? And we did this by verifying the landscaping work that we'd done in phase 1 and expanding the number of tools and deployments that we could find via a survey and or other information. As we collected and developed this tool database, we mapped each of our tools to those use cases that Merrick identified. So for example, in Malawi, when we looked at OpenLMIS, we said, okay, this is a supply chain tool that can also be used for something like vaccine delivery and planning. So we mapped each of our tools to those use cases to understand where are there gaps in a country. So say for Malawi, there might be a lot of tools that do supply chain, but there might not be as many tools that are in the use case for say maybe contact tracing of points of entry. So that helped us understand where are those gaps. We then wanted to make sure that we understood any sort of unique country context. So we talked to the Ministry of Health to understand are they focusing on, let's say, telemedicine or strengthening their electronic medical records? Or do they have any sort of specific privacy laws that we should be aware of as we looked at tools so that when we were ready to recommend something, it fit within the ministry's priorities. Once we collected each of those things, all that information, we were able to look at scale a little bit. So we tried to collect information on whether or not a tool was deployed at the national scale or subnational, with the idea that we didn't want to recommend a tool that was in a pilot phase. We wanted to make sure that tools were at national scale that fit that gap that we'd identified so that we could suggest tools that would support a quick adaptation, as Merrick was mentioning, something that was existing, that could be adapted quickly and deployed and would eventually hopefully stay and be sustainable in the long term. Next slide, please. And we did this with a variety of different ways, the first of which was using an online survey tool. So as we were collecting information in phase 1, we also collected any contact information we could find. So any emails that came up associated with a tool, we captured, and we used that as our first batch of emailing out the survey. We also emailed the survey out to global listservs, national listservs, anything we could find. And we also included a little a contact thing in the survey where people could add additional names for people who might be able to provide us with additional information to support that snowballing effect and allow us to capture as many folks as we possibly could. We also conducted some key informant interviews with Digital Square Global Goods, where we wanted to understand where those tools were deployed, what that scale looked like, any challenges they were seeing, and the types of adaptations that they were making, and making sure we understood how those adaptations could be used in different countries. We also spoke to Ministry of Health officials where we could, and we walked through the data with them, trying to validate as much of that data as we could, and then tried to understand that country context, just to get a sense of what their priorities were moving forward. Next slide, please. And over to Amanda.
Great, you can go to the next slide. So I'm going to walk through the many outputs from this project. And the predominant output are these country briefs. I'm going to spend a little bit of time later unpacking them. But these briefs, which many of you might already be clicking around and looking through them, which is completely fine. The goal and the intent of them is to be very visual, not too much text, and to really illuminate the digital health tools that are actively used in the countries, how they're currently being used for COVID-19 response, and those gaps, those opportunities where existing tools could be adapted and scaled across a set of pandemic use cases. We provide examples of global goods that are ready for adaptation and deployment through these briefs. So we lean very heavily on our Digital Square global goods community, which includes over 30 global goods, to get information from them about where they know they're active in countries and what they're doing and how they could do more in terms of having countries adapt their tools. There's a lot of visual elements about licensing, about scale. We recommend actions and resources to support strategic investments in these briefs. And we also articulate how tools can support vaccine deployment. That's an annex that we added that we worked on with UNICEF. Next slide. If you have not already heard about the DATEC, it is the digital applications and tools across an epidemiological curve. Why did we do this? This was a bit of a passion project personally, because this doesn't exist anywhere in our digital health ecosystem. Looking at different phases of an outbreak and how a country is responding, what is happening, and what is the most strategic use of digital tools as you're at these different phases. I think many of us, myself included, who worked in Ebola, we lived this and we wanted to put this on paper as a starting point and as a framework for countries to use and think about how they might be able to really accelerate their own digital tools. This was developed in the context of COVID, but it is not COVID specific. So it is a tool and a framework that we think can be used in the future and referenced in the future. So this is a multi-layered framework, and we visualize how these digital tools can be strategically used at different times. We identify tools and applications that should be in place ideally before any type of outbreak occurs, and also recommend strategies for what to do to improve those tools and strengthen the health system after an outbreak. We talk about lots of different components in this epidemiological curve. We talk about data science, interoperability, the role routine surveillance plays before, during, and after an outbreak. We leaned heavily on the context of COVID. So we even unpacked a little bit about applications and tools and how they can support diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. So what's the overlay there? We looked at a health systems approach. So when things are happening during an outbreak, how can digital tools mitigate some of those stressors like health workforce shortages, overwhelmed facilities, overwhelmed systems? These are examples, they are not exhaustive, but it is, again, really getting countries and getting people thinking about how digital can be an accelerator and can aid in the context of an outbreak. Next slide. As Verda mentioned, we really wanted to unpack scale a little bit because we wanted to put in the briefs and recommend adaptation of tools that are not at a pilot phase, that are scaled and used in a country. And where we actually landed was the subnational and the national description of scale. But we had done a lot of work with a lot of partners because this is such a hot topic as we were working on Map and Match. And we've published this framework on scale and a way to measure scale a little bit more deeply, or to think about scale a little bit more deeply. And we have done this with some of the tools in some of the countries. And we've got an example of this in this framework document, but really unpacking understanding scale by number of users, the breadth of the tool use, and institutionalization of the tool. Is it in a national strategy, for example? Is it in a national budget, a line item in the budget? This, again, hot topic. I think this is a framework that can be built from and used, and it complements some of the existing frameworks that are already in our space, which we talk about in this document that Kelly just posted the link. And again, it takes a different way of thinking about scale building on what's already there. Next slide. So adaptations. As I said, we leaned heavily on our global goods community. And one of the things that folks asked for really quickly was, I just want to know right now, what tool can do this use case? What tool could be adapted? So we put together this 2-pager, just highlighting really quickly, and we validated all of this with our global goods community. This is the use case, for example, coordination and operation. mHero can do this right now, but the community health toolkit and some other tools can easily be adapted to respond to this use case. So if you're looking for a quick snapshot on existing tools and adaptations, I really think that this is a useful resource, and it complements the DATEC, which I had talked about earlier. And we know, again, that this is important because we've heard time and time again, during a crisis, please don't give me a new tool to learn and code and deploy. Give me something I'm already using. It's already in my system, already in the hands of health workers in my country. They can learn new functionality of an existing tool that they already have, but bringing some whole new tool in, thinking about interoperability with other tools is not an efficient and productive way to use digital health in our crisis. Next slide. So I've talked about some of the big ones, but we have more outputs, and you can find them all on our website. If you want to share about this project with your colleague and don't really know how to articulate the gamut of all of this, we have a high-level summary of Map and Match. So just kind of what is it, what did we do, what are the outputs? That is on our website. That information about vaccine deployment, which is couched in each individual brief, we have it also as a specific document that is on our website. I think it's really helpful and something that will be built off of, as we're thinking more about how digital tools can respond to different phases of the vaccine deployment. Our survey tool is on our website. So the data model, how did we collect data? We really aligned it with the Digital Health Atlas data model. So to see what that looks like and the types of questions that we asked, you can access all of that on our website. By the end of the month, all of our data will be on our website in an Excel document so that you can take it, you can use secondary data analysis and play with it. This is the phase 1 data, which is not validated, but that 139 countries, over 2,900 deployments of tools, all of that will be on our website. And all of the phase 2 data will be put in there as well. We worked really closely with GIZ, who have developed a digital pandemic preparedness assessment tool. One of the things we did early days with them is those use cases that Merrick spoke about. We aligned those use cases so that they were using the same terminology of use cases in the Map and Match project and in the DPPA. And then what you'll be able to do is, one, you can access the DPPA, that tool on our website, and kind of how to use it and some more information about the DPPA. And then if you want to use your own DPPA, do your own DPPA, which goes much deeper than our Map and Match data does, you can simply cut and paste a row from our data set from Map and Match and put it into the DPPA, and it pre-populates. So you're not starting from scratch, which you shouldn't do. You should use the data that exists in the Digital Health Atlas. You should use all of our data. And then if you need to go further and do some other assessments, use what's already been done. It's a lot of work that's been done and collecting information. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel by creating new tools and by redoing data analysis or data collection. And then finally, we have a link to the Digital Health Atlas on our website. We're going to have more information there about how we've been working with the WHO to get our data into the Digital Health Atlas. We've been working very closely with our friends at Dial, who've been amazing supporters on this, and more information about that will be there. A question that we get a lot is, are you going to update your data set? Are you going to update these briefs? No, we're not. This is in one snapshot of time. And we want our data to live in the Atlas and to be updated there and to be built on there. That's what it was created for. So these are useful now, and I'll probably be useful in the future in the way that we have organized our briefs and organized our information. But in terms of maintaining and updating data, that will be in the Atlas, hopefully. Next slide. All right, let's do a deep dive into these country briefs. Next slide. Let me talk a little bit about these briefs before we dive in and start, unpacking some of the information. So what are they meant to do? They're meant to provide a quick visual assessment of the digital tools that are in a country related to the COVID-19 pandemic. A really important caveat here is these briefs do not include every single digital health tool in the country. Many of the tools that we found don't have any utility in terms of the use cases that we prioritized and we went over in response of COVID-19. So you're not going to go in this brief and see a number and say, oh, they have 50 tools in the country. There are 50 tools that apply to the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, our full data set does have all the tools that we found in the country. So I really, again, I think there's a lot of utility for secondary data analysis in that data set when we publish it on our website. And I encourage you, it's in Excel, take it, play it, filter it, see what tools there are for family planning, see what tools there are for nutrition. We want that to be a service for you all and want that to be useful. But going back to the briefs, they highlight what's there and how the tools that are there can be used to support any existing gaps in the country that we found in terms of the COVID-19 response. Some of our limitations, I had said that, we're only featuring in the briefs the tools that are responsive to the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't know if that's necessarily a limitation, but we just don't want someone to look at that number and think there are only that many tools in the country. We did not collect information about ICT infrastructure or any information specific to health verticals. So is this an HIV tool? Is this a family planning tool? We didn't get into that much detail in the briefs. Our full data set does have more detail. And we don't have information about, network coverage in the country or those types of things. As we've said, it's only focused on COVID-19 adaptations. And as hard as we worked and the best that we did, I cannot say with full confidence that they are 100% accurate. I kind of like the 80-20. I think it's probably 80% accurate, to be honest. We worked really hard to validate this data, to collect data, to have conversations with people. And we had a really aggressive timeline in doing this. So just keep in mind, there might be some gaps. There might be something that you know of that's in country that we don't have here. You can always tell us that and let us know. But we worked really hard to validate as much as we could. I can't tell you how much data you'll see when the full data set is published that we have here. Next slide. All right, how do we read one of these briefs? As I said, you're probably already downloading and looking at them, which is fantastic. I'm going to use Senegal as an example here. This was actually our first one that we published. So we have this number at the top. And what does this number mean? These numbers mean. So this means that in the context of the pandemic and these use cases, we found 50 tools. 27 of them are scaled nationally. 16 have already been deployed in some way for the COVID-19 response, and 19 potential adaptations for COVID-19. So that's a lot of information right there about, okay, they're already using a lot of tools for COVID-19 response, but there are also a lot of opportunities where if they have needs, they can adapt existing tools that they already have. Next slide. So we have this tree map also on the first page. And what we did here is we took all those pandemic use cases, again, same ones in the DATEC, same ones in the DPPA. And we just wanted to show, like, okay, how do these go? How do these tools overlay across these use cases? So in this example here, we found 7 pandemic use cases that didn't have very many digital health tools. And that might be okay. It might be that they have one tool scaled nationally that's just rocking it for this particular use case. But it also might be a limitation in the country. So these, where you see we don't have that many tools or some of the smaller parts of the tree map, that's where you might want to look a little bit further and dig a little bit deeper. And I'll show you how to do that for the next couple of pages of the brief. Next slide. So we have these tables in the brief. And this is of, all those tools we found. So these 54, all of them that we have, we created this table and mapped them across all of these use cases. So the colors matter. If it's blue, it's been adapted for COVID-19 already. If it's green, there's a possibility for adaptations. So for this example, if we look at I1 Medical, you can see there are 2 use cases where this tool is already in some way being used in the COVID-19 response. And there are 5 use cases that we've identified where that existing tool could be adapted and used for additional uses. So that's one way to look at it. You can look at it across as a specific tool. And we have this for all of the tools that we found in the countries that are used for the response. And you'll see kind of if you get toward the bottom of each of these tables, it's a lot of green. So you'll see there's a lot of tools that are not being used at all in COVID-19 response, but there are opportunities. So as you're looking through these tables, just kind of read and scroll down and look at the tools, and you'll see a lot more green toward the bottom. Another way to look at this, and I think probably one of the more useful ways, is let's look vertically. Let's look at a particular use case. So if you were to take one of the briefs and look at learning and training it, for example, you might be able to see, I mean, according to this data, there was only one tool that we found that was currently being used for learning and training. But you'll see a lot of green. You'll see a lot of opportunities where other tools could be adapted and used for that particular use case. So when you're looking at these tables, look vertically and look horizontally. I think you'll find a lot of different ways to read the information. And again, we really wanted this to be very visual and not a lot of text. Next slide. So we do some of that work for you in the briefs. We highlight, okay, here are a lot of the opportunities that we found. So for those use cases where there was a lot of green, we wanted to illustrate, look, these are some of the opportunities. So going back to learning and training, we're still on Senegal here. That safe delivery app is already doing it, but look at all these other tools that are there that can meet this use case need across the country. So, that safe delivery app may be used only, in some parts of the country with some cadres of health workers, but these other tools could be touching and be in the hands of other health workers. So you want to learn a little bit more about how you might be able to use some of the other tools to meet some of these different use case needs. We have a lot of extra highlighted information here on this page about global goods that we support through Digital Square. Some examples of how they've been adapted in other countries and examples of how they could be adapted in the current context of the country brief. We even give information of, okay, this is already being used for X number of use cases, could be 0, but this global good, which you have in country, could be used for different use cases. Again, just another way of visualizing that table in the same data. Next slide. So you found a tool that you want to know more about. The next part of the brief is kind of unpacking. Okay, this is a description of that tool. Again, using our same color scheme, blue, you'll see this is where it's already being used for COVID. Green, these are the opportunities. As much as we could, we have information on who's funding the implementation of that tool and who's actually implementing it. Could be an NGO partner on the ground who's implementing it, or a number of partners. So if you're in country and you're like, I want to know more about how this tool could be used, it's a little bit of a guide of who to go to and talk to. We also have information about the licensing and about the scale. So these tables of the in-depth look are where you don't have to go and do a Google search to find out about the tool. We've got high-level summary here. Next slide. For many of our country briefs, we validated this information with ministries of health, and we had conversations with them about, hey, how's it going? How are you using digital tools in your COVID response? So we've got quotes sprinkled out. We've got a couple here from from different ministries of health that you can read on the deck. But these are just so informative and so enlightening and so important, because these are the leaders that you want to listen to. They are driving their response to COVID, how they want their response to go. So I think you'll see a lot of really nice anecdotes and quotes here throughout the briefs. Next slide. Okay, Merrick, I'm going to pass it over to you to talk about some of the questions that happen a lot in terms of digital tools in the COVID response.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. So you now have kind of a sense of what is in a brief. What do we actually imagine people doing with these briefs, other than looking at them while you're watching this webinar and being like, oh, these are pretty. Next slide, please. So imagine you're in a country and you are maybe in charge of, let's say, a polio vaccination tool that is being used to get those last few children vaccinated in country. It's been around for a decade, and the Ministry of Health calls you into a meeting to talk about the need to do COVID-19 vaccination. And you know a lot about your tool, you know a little bit that there's probably other vaccine tools that are being used for other routine immunizations, but you don't have a clear picture of what's happening. The idea of this brief is that and hopefully others within the context of this meeting being held at the ministry will be able to bring this information and be able to look at it in a snapshot in the context of that meeting to talk about what type of tool could be best fit for assisting with the COVID vaccination rollout. There might be a variety of different scenarios within that use case you explore around messaging people for demand, around actually tracking the distribution of the vaccines, tracking and verifying who's gotten vaccinated. And all of that could be gleaned from thinking about this analysis in the context of the problem that you're facing in that technical working group. So questions that this brief might answer from country leaders and implementers include, how can digital tools support the COVID-19 response? Hit enter, Riley. Yeah, so these tools, of course, break down all of these frameworks that allow us to think a little bit about the types of use cases that are useful in the context of COVID, or pretty much any epidemic or pandemic globally, as well as within the context of vaccine distribution. So the thinking that's gone into defining the use cases should help you hone in on what tools might be useful for different problems you're facing at the country level. Another question that these briefs might be able to answer for you are specifically, what are the open source tools? And again, we focus on open source because we know we can adapt them due to their licensing quickly. It might require sort of different financing as a funder. It's actually probably more difficult for us to partner with another funder around adapting an implementation they have than just issue an RFP blindly and get a new response back. However, we know that that's the right thing to do. And so these tools can help us identify which ones that we know for sure can be adapted. And there's a number of other resources that you can find up on the site and around that help identify what some of those tools are. Another question it could answer, of course, and I think this one is the one that most people are focused on right now in the moment, is what tools can support vaccine plan out, rolling, and monitoring. And I saw there was a question in the chat that I tried to respond to, but this is something we're very aware of as a high priority right now for countries. And so we worked with UNICEF around an entire annex to better break down the vaccine response use cases. And UNICEF's doing additional work building off of the initial data that we collected to flesh out some of the thinking around this. But these country briefs and the larger data set can let you identify quickly the types of tools you would need in the context of vaccine rollout. Next slide. And of course, it answers the question of what tools are already in country. Having spent many years working in country, I knew of tremendous amount of systems that were being deployed by our own organization as well as others. But there were always new systems I was discovering, and some of the systems were actually quite large or quite innovative. And so having to be able to have a quick snapshot of organized information is really one of the intents of these briefs. And finally, how can I learn if a tool is already used to be adapted for different uses to support the COVID response? And so, we really tried to highlight where we thought the highest adaptations are. So for those of you who have been working in the digital health space for a while, you know that a case management tool like ComCare, OpenSRP, DHIS2 Tracker, or Medic Mobile's Community Health Toolkit, any of those tools can really be designed, can be configured for a lot of variety of use cases. So that might be that the tool is being used for integrated case management so for integrated case management, can actually have a module set up within it to be able to use it for surveillance, to be able to use it for contact tracing, to be able to use it as an immunization registry at very little cost and effort, because the code has already been written. It would need to be customized probably for the local context, but 90% of the work has been done around that, and the health workers are probably already familiar and trained within that tool. So those adaptation cases are really ones that we think are the highest value targets. And in the context of this, the DPPA tool that we mentioned a few times earlier, it was developed by GIZ to be on the ground gap analysis tool. So you can take the data, we actually put the data together and worked on the model with GIZ to make sure you could cut and paste from the map and match data directly into their gap analysis tool. And what that tool does is provide a further level of analysis that a country team on the ground in a ministry meeting like the one I described could use to identify where there are gaps in digital tools to support the COVID response or vaccine distribution, and help you enable how to prioritize and target what you should actually be investing in to get the largest return on your investment. So next slide, please. And so other questions that these could help you address, who do I contact to adapt and scale tools for COVID-19? So if you do find a tool, what do you do then? So let's say that FCDO has deployed a tool, you don't know the people, you don't necessarily know the people there, or maybe you don't even know who it was initially that deployed that tool, but you might know of a tool you'd like to explore for the use of COVID. Within our data set, we identify who's actually funded and who's implementing those tools. So you can reach out in the country context to those partners to try to identify whether you can adapt it. We also recommend that UNICEF and WHO have set up a new country TA facility that is designed specifically to help guide people to the types of solutions that we're talking about here, and to help governments and other implementers think through things like avoiding the duplication of tools, the fragmentation, think through interoperability before the investments are made. So we definitely recommend reaching out to the UNICEF WHO DICE facility before you start work. And finally, we've had a lot of questions that come to, okay, so I'm working on COVID today, but my normal day job outside the context of the pandemic is whatever the other subject, family planning, maternal health, malaria elimination. Can we use the map and match data for those things? And the answer to that is yes. The reason why we're publishing the full data set and we're doing the work to enter the data into WHO's Digital Health Atlas is because we believe that there's a lot of extra value that's going to come from these secondary uses of this data. We've already dug into regions where we don't have country briefs on and shared that data with countries. I've shared out information that's filtered by the original use case or the health domain, and I think there's a tremendous amount of value in this larger data set for almost every area of health that we work in, beyond just the immediate ones that we're focusing on around COVID. And then another scenario, next slide, that we want to think through is from the investor perspective. And so the scenario here that I want you to imagine is that you are being requested potentially by a country government to invest in a specific tool, like for let's say contact tracing or COVID surveillance, and there's a tool named that they want to deploy in country, and it might be one that doesn't already exist in that country. Before you make that investment, do check the map and match brief to understand whether or not there is an existing tool in country that could be quickly adapted. And again, it might not seem like it because everyone might know of that tool as a name having to do with a different health domain. Maybe it's an MCH tool, or it's a family planning tool, or it's an HIV tool. But the actual software and the hardware and the training and the work that's been used, the workflows around that can probably be adapted and be better than deploying a new tool. I know that a common mistake is that people always, at least I've made in the past, is misestimating how long it takes to deploy new solutions. You almost always think like, oh, we could do this in 6 weeks, and it ends up taking 3 times that time. Or maybe you get something up in 6 weeks, but it's only a fraction of what you actually need, or you're not able to scale it all the way. And so these briefs are aimed to provide you that information, what's already in country, so you can be adapted. So that's the first question. The second one is, what are the vetted tools that investors and other partners are looking into? Now, this isn't something that Digital Square or this project actually does, that we did pull the Global Goods Guidebook and showcase the tools that have been invested in and for these use cases. So we're not looking or rating the quality of the tools or deployments. We all know that you could take a top-notch tool and deploy it very poorly and have bad outcomes, or you could probably take a very scrappy, simple tool and do an excellent implementation, have very good outcomes. So it's not always the tool itself that matters as much as the implementation. Next slide, please. For the same audience, we try to answer the question of, again, of who are the partners to reach out to for that coordination and collaboration. we know that a lot of the challenges that arose in the context of Ebola was from just that problem of coordination. So we're hoping that these briefs bring together different donor actors on the ground in the country to be able to have those conversations around what their plans are and to see what others have invested in. One of the classic cases is two large donors. I'm going to pick on USAID for a second. So USAID and let's say our friends over at the World Bank are both rushing really hard to meet the needs that a country has and are not communicating in a country and coming up with similar solutions that are different for the same problem that we intend to deploy within a few months of each other. So hopefully this brief can bring people together so those types of issues do not arise. And then finally, we try to help think through all of the different, as a funder, landscapes and assessments that are being done, and try to do some work to standardize that approach. So for future assessments, we really recommend that you use the data model that we developed here in conjunction with WHO and the Digital Health Atlas. I know that our partners at UNICEF and partners at CDC have already, for their own additional landscaping efforts, taken that data model and built off of it. And then it allows that data to then be migrated into the Digital Health Atlas, which we also recommend people going to and doing. Like if we can enter things directly into the Atlas, that would be fantastic. It would make an entire project like this something we could do in the course of a week or two, just doing the analysis of the data rather than having to do the collection of the data, which is what took so long. And then also we really want to emphasize the use of GIZ's DPPA tool as a form of further analysis, both of the enabling environment of a country to get at those questions like connectivity, like electricity, like workforce training in depth. It has those pieces built in, as well as the gap analysis component within that tool to allow you to really focus in on where to move limited dollars, or maybe in the case of COVID, as there's a lot of financing, it might be limited time. Where do we put our time and attention to have the greatest impact possible? So those are the types of questions we are hoping that this research and these briefs and these data sets and data models can answer for the different audiences. Next slide, please. So I'm going to pass it back to Amanda, and she can sort of wrap up some of the thinking around this.
Thanks a lot, Merrick. And I think it's really great to go through those questions, and those are questions that, you know, we are hearing and we are assuming that people have about our tools. So if you have other questions about any of the information here, or how you can use this information, please don't hesitate to reach out to Merrick or I. I have my email in the slide deck. Next slide here. All right, what is next? We are working really hard on disseminating all of this information, and specifically getting these country briefs in front of the eyes of ministries of health and partners in these 22 countries where we've spent a lot of time going through and doing this research. So we're working closely with USAID missions to not only just email them these briefs, but have a conversation with them about how to read them, how to understand them, you know, what some of those gaps are, and just what are the needs in countries. So we're doing that now, and already have a couple of conversations with missions that we have got on the calendar. We're sharing these resources across the donor community. Merrick mentioned earlier a host of different investors and donors that we've been partnering with through this project. And this has not been a one-off, here's what we're doing, moving on. It's been a very inclusive conversation about how we've gone about doing this, how we can use this information, a lot of technical input into the DATEC, into the scale tool. So we're really working to, you know, share all of the outputs that many of them contributed to across the donor community, and advocating that they also share with their country partners that they're working with. So we're working with partners who are conducting assessments to build on this data. We already know about CDC, GIZ, and UNICEF, who are conducting assessments going, in some cases, much deeper than we've gone through Map and Match. So we talk with them. This is how you can build on our data. This is how you can use it. They're on board with, we're not going to create a new assessment tool. We're going to use what's already out there. We're going to use the Map and Match data, which is great. So we work closely with them to really use that data, and not just the 22 countries, but the whole 140 countries, because there is a lot of information there. It just needs to be validated. And many of them are doing these specific in-country assessments where they can have interviews and key informant interviews and discussions with partners in country. And this is what they can build off of to get them started. So that's been really helpful. We can conduct assessments and create country briefs in other countries upon request with funding. I'll have to note that. So if there is a country that would like to have one of these country briefs done, we're happy to work with a donor and with a partner to take all of the information that we already have, take our frameworks for creating these briefs, take some of our different methods for collecting the information, validating the information, and even some new methods that we've learned about that would be really helpful so that we get as much accurate information as possible. So if you're a donor on this call or you're a partner on this call and you're like, hey, I really want to have this brief, say for a country in Latin America, reach out to us. We can have a conversation about that. And then with additional resources, we really want to be able to use this information to support countries. This is only as good as it is used. So we had we're doing a big adapt and scale push. So, hey, adapt and scale. These are the tools that are there, use them. So how are we doing that? How are we ensuring that countries use the tools that they have where they have gaps? So we're doing that by working closely with DICE to highlight gaps and opportunities. I put some information about DICE in the chat. I can't emphasize enough the importance of coordination with DICE, and really for ministries of health to outreach directly to DICE where they need support and help, whether it be an assessment or actually, deploying a specific tool. We're working across donors to highlight different country priorities as they come up. There is a large coordination group of donors that has spun out of Map and Match. And that coordination is really, really important. And so, USAID really driving that from the Map and Match standpoint and bringing Digital Square in as needed. We have conversations with donors ad hoc at least once or twice, I would say at least once a week, about what we're doing, how we can use the information. We're also continuing coordination to support country priorities through Digital Square and our partners, our Global Good community, working with the countries that we are already working in through Digital Square. For example, Mali, we're actually supporting Mali with vaccine deployment. So Mali was not one of the countries of our 22 where we did a brief, but we have a lot of data on Mali. So we've been working to build off of that data and work in concert with partners in Mali who are doing their own assessments, like the World Bank and UNICEF, having the most accurate information, and then rapidly working with the Ministry of Health to use digital tools to support their needs in the terms of the vaccine rollout. Time is very limited. And so this is very fast paced. So we want to bring in our knowledge and support countries and working across other partners who are working in countries as well. Next slide. So I just want to share in closing a few reflections. Leading this project has been incredibly rewarding and a lot of work, and I've learned a lot myself, and just want to share some of this with you all. So this coordination piece is essential. We did not do this well during the Ebola response at all. I remember there would be a weekly call where we would all hop on the call on Friday mornings and talk about what we were doing, and then we'd go about our weeks. And at the time, I thought that was amazing. But in the reality, when you actually got on the ground of the deployment of the tools, it wasn't coordinated. And so really, this is government, partners, investors, everyone needs to take that time to send that email, make that phone call to coordinate with who else is doing other work in country. It takes time to do this coordination, and it might feel like a road bump, but it really does yield efficiencies down the road. Using existing data collection and assessment tools such as the DPPA is use what's there. So you want to build on the tools and the data that are there. You do not need to create a new assessment tool. I think there's some guidance even coming out from a group of donors about please don't create a new assessment tool. We've got fantastic assessment tools out there. So use what is already there. And if it doesn't have all the questions that you really need to have answered, then add to that tool, add to those questions. That's pretty easy, but you'll find something like the DPPA, it goes really deep and gets really specific and technical. However, I will note that our sector is exhausted with surveys. So if you can, don't send out another survey. Have someone physically in country doing a phone call or a key informant interview using that survey tool, but do a conversation. I think doing it in country is much faster than doing it remotely. That was a challenge that we faced, being based not in the specific countries where we were doing all of this data collection. But just note, everyone's exhausted with filling out surveys. They really want to move on and adapt tools. Share the data to the Digital Health Atlas, and plan time and budget to do that. You're not going to just email them a data set and say, upload it to the Atlas, please. Thank you. That is not how it works. So we really encourage you to have a conversation with the folks at the WHO. The product manager for the Digital Health Atlas is lovely. He'd be happy to talk with you about how to get your existing data in there. As I said, use the data model. They've made it public, and we also are making it public through how we've collected map and match information. And we really advocate for getting data into the Atlas. In fact, some of you may actually hear from us or from WHO about validating some data that we've collected from this process to get it uploaded into the Atlas. And in closing, just the conversations on scale are very complex. There are a lot of opinions, there are a lot of thoughts. I thought in creating that scale framework, it would be quick. It was not. It was very, very, very detailed, but really enlightening. Everyone's really passionate about scale. So I would say take that scale framework and build off of it. Next slide. So all of our resources can be found on our website. Everything we've talked about today, the full data set and additional country briefs are coming. That link has been shared in the chat. Please email me if you've got any questions, or email colleagues at Digital Square. We're happy to share more of this with you. Happy to go deeper in conversation. So just want to thank you all so much for your time today and listening to us talk about this project. I want to thank my fellow co-presenters, Merrick and Varunda, and we will share a link to the recording for this presentation and all of these slides on our Map and Match website, so you can share with colleagues. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you all.
Good job.
All right, we did it.